hour with Mr. Howden. We're going to chew up some laws here today, Mr. Howden.
Yeah, and they're coming from unusual sources like Wyoming
and Louisiana. Right now, down in Louisiana, I got the top story of the day that I think is rather interesting. There is a bill that is going to reduce the penalties just past the full Senate, Mr. Howden.
Yeah, I saw that too. And what was funny was some of the quotes in there that Casey will get to in a minute. But basically, what they're doing in Louisiana is that it's not a medical or recreational bill. It's just reducing the penalties in case you're caught with amounts less than 2.5 pounds.
Yes, I'd rather actually kind of interesting. It was Senate Bill 241, sponsored by J.P. Morrell, Democrat of New Orleans, and he quotes, "in a way that is more humane to treat marijuana penalties. Under the current law, the maximum penalties for possession of any amount of marijuana up to 60 pounds are a $500 fine and 6 months in jail for a first offense and up to 20 years in prison for a third offense." So that's a lifetime for most people.
Oh, yeah. And for, again, possessing up to 60 pounds.
Right.
What they've done is they have reduced the penalties from that to $55 or $125 if you have less than 14 grams. Is that right?
Yeah, it actually creates a new penalty system dealing with amounts less than 2.5 pounds. And under the bill, it changes basically the possessions and the offenses. So it's not allowing you to grow it. It's not allowing you to sell it. It's just changing what happens to you when you're in the wrong place at the wrong time with your cannabis. And the bill actually sets up amounts does not change anything for amounts between 14 and 2.5 grams. Possession of less than 14 grams of marijuana is punishable by a maximum sentence of $300 fine and 15 days in jail. The proposal would allow offenders to apply also to have their records expunged if they aren't convicted of marijuana violations within 2 years of the first offense. And that means a lot to people out there. Once you're hit with cannabis possession or a felony, you're almost unemployable in this nation. So it's more than just being caught with cannabis. It takes almost away your right to work.
Yeah, but it's also, too, you need to be aware it's a one strike or you're out deal. You get one shot at expunging your record.
Yeah, so do it right.
Yeah, and don't get caught again.
And what's interesting about this, Mr. Hopland, I find is we talk about this every day on the radio, and it's 2 steps forward and 1 step back. If you paid attention, Morrell's bill actually died in committee in 2014 after hours and hours of debate. So it didn't end with that loss. It just takes another step forward the following year. And get this is what I thought was brilliant. It's actually expected to generate a savings over 5 years of over $17 million, Mr. Howard.
Yeah.
What would you do with that?
That was, I mean, just think about it. Just reducing the maximum penalty from 20 years to 8 years, which 8 years for possession of marijuana is still kind of off the chain.
Correct.
The quote that Casey's going to get to in a minute is just classic. But at any rate, a savings of $17 million to the taxpayers of Louisiana just by, even adding a modicum of rationality to marijuana offenses.
And that could be duplicated all across this nation just by, and this is what we call the incarceration nation problem. The current laws for possession of cannabis and hemp has actually created the problems that we see in most of our cities. The drug wars is actually a war upon ourselves, Mr. Howden. And I'd like to give a tip of the hat to Representative Morrill there in Louisiana, New Orleans to be exact, for at least trying to do this over and over. Even when his bill died last year, he did not give up. He came back, he pushed it through, and Louisiana is set to save $17 million, not put people in jail, clean up the justice system down there, and help average Americans expunge their records of a careless offense.
Yeah, and again, it's a giant step in the right direction. We realize that this really doesn't have anything to do with business, but if Louisiana is going to adopt a dialogue that involves discussions that included both the Louisiana Sheriff's Association and the Louisiana District Attorneys Association, neither which opposed the bill, at least we're getting the word out there that maybe there's a different way of dealing with this particular product, and getting people, talking about it, and that's the biggest thing.
And that's what I'd like to point out with Senate Bill 241 of Louisiana by Representative Morrell, Morrell, J.P. Morrell. It actually reduces the maximum penalty for possession from 20 years to 8, raises the threshold for a felony level possession charge, and adds a second chance provision for first-time offenders. So if you're in Louisiana and you're listening to this and you have cannabis on your mind, make sure you understand this law and abide by it so you're not caught between a rock and a hard place. It is quite an amazing situation where we can see that the people and the legislator can work together and potentially end the incarceration nation. America incarcerates more people per capita than any other nation on the planet, to include some of our arch rivals that we tend to demonize daily in the newspapers. We should actually look at our own backyard, and this is a great step on ending the incarceration nation problem, saving us millions of dollars, saving families from being torn apart. And Representative Morrell says, I quote, "This is a tremendous perception problem in Louisiana regarding the cool hand loop approach to incarceration. Louisiana's harsh marijuana laws are described as quote unquote draconian." And most,
Amen.
Yeah, right. It's kind of interesting when we talk about this. That bill actually is now headed to the full House for consideration, and I believe down there they have until June 17th until the legislature is over. So there's still time to get this passed down in Louisiana on the House floor. So if you are listening to us, please reach out to your representatives. They do listen to their phone calls. They do check their faxes. They do open their emails. They have to. It's the law. So call them, write them, email them right now. Tell them to support Senate Bill 241 in Louisiana. And guess what? You can have your cool hand involved in any prohibition.
Yeah, and for those of you that have never seen Cool Hand Luke, you've got to see that movie, because you'll understand immediately when you watch that movie what they're talking about, the Cool Hand Luke approach to incarceration in Louisiana. Also, too, Casey, you got to read the quote about the number of times that it's worse in this state as opposed to any other.
Oh, yes, that is true. The Louisiana is not known for being the kindest place in the nation for cannabis. Indeed, by reducing the maximum penalty from 20 years to 8, Louisiana's penalties are still 8 times higher than surrounding states. And the interesting quote was, Morrell said, I quote, "At least they are not 20 times higher," unquote.
Now that is definitely trying to put a spin on something that's really horrible.
We'll be driving through Louisiana, Mr. Out in Baton Rouge on our End of Prohibition tour. So if you do want to meet us in person and join us on the road, you can check us out at endofprohibition.com. We have a big show starting off in Kansas City on June 5th with Mr. Houghton himself. We'll be discussing the hemp laws, the medical marijuana laws, the business models, and how to take advantage and prepare for those, regardless of what state, city, or town you were in. It's a game of chess, and it's marijuana, and you can win.
Yeah, and it's a matter of getting out there, and you've heard it over and over and over from the people that have called into this show. You've heard it over and over and over again that it's ordinary people that have simply said, okay, I've had enough of this. I've had enough of this madness. I've got children that need the medicine. I've got friends who need the medicine, and it's time to get out there and do something about it. And the other place that I saw in the news that was coming on with this time with a medical marijuana program was the state of Wyoming, a state that I didn't anticipate would come on anytime very soon.
They've been very hard on their fellow citizens up there in Wyoming when it comes to legalization. They don't take it very kindly.
Yeah, but again, the dialogue has been opened again in the Wyoming legislature. There are people that are pushing for patients' rights there to be able to use the product as medicine. And again, it's one more step. It's one more open door. It's one more, how do you get into this business, well, it's one state at a time.
That's right. In every state, currently there's 23 states in the District of Columbia with medical marijuana laws. There's another 16 states with CBD, low THC laws, and there's 4 states with full recreational laws approved on the books: Alaska, Oregon, Washington, and Colorado. DC has approved recreational adult use marijuana, but has set up absolutely no means of cultivation and distribution. So it's a wild west of marijuana in DC right now.
Yeah, and speaking of the Wild West in some place, Illinois. I read an article in Illinois that there are 2 bills before the governor there, or before the state legislature there. One is that most people don't realize it, but the Illinois program was a pilot program. It was passed in 2013, and it was only supposed to last for 4 years, which means that it would have ended in 2018, or just a year and a half from now, or 2.5 years from now, year and a half from now. Anyway, the problem was that there's not a single store that's been opened, even though it's been on the books now for 2 years. And so due to bureaucratic delays and lawsuits and monkeying around with the law and everything else, not a single patient has been able to buy a single gram of medicine.
We're talking about Illinois right now. Illinois, a year ago, if it was paying attention, that was a hot spot for marijuana because they approved the Illinois Compassionate Use Act and actually set up 60, was it 1 license per county, 21
Yes.
counties?
No, it was by police district.
By police district.
They did cultivation centers by police district.
Very unique solution.
Yeah, and it was almost comical because one of the police districts was the tollway.
It had there's no place to put it.
There's no physical place to put it. I had a solution to it, though. I told them half of Chicago is built on stilts. Why don't you just put stilts on something and build it over the top of the interstate? They didn't like that idea much.
So it's interesting. We look at these laws. We talk about playing chess. Illinois, a year ago, passed this law, set up the application process.
2 years ago.
2 years ago, set up the application process, set up the standards and procedures. People have applied. People have been approved. People have filed lawsuits. And here we are 2 years later, and you still cannot buy a gram of weed legally in Illinois.
Yeah, and that, to me, that is, I don't know whether they're burying their head in sand and hoping that the problem goes away. If you're listening in Illinois, I can assure you that the people who have spent hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars, applying and getting ready to start producing or selling marijuana as medicine in Illinois, they're not going to go away. So one of the bills that's before the governor is a bill that would extend the pilot program, the Compassionate Act program, for 4 years after the first dispensary opens, which I really think is what the people in Illinois thought they were voting for. And turns out that that's not exactly what they were voting for. But I think, if you're going to do a pilot program, I think having a decent period of time in which to evaluate it is critical. I'm not in favor of pilot programs because I don't like the sunset provisions when, all of a sudden all this hard work and the patients learn to rely on the medicine. All of a sudden the rug gets jerked out from underneath you, or it becomes a political football when this, sunset is coming up. So anyway, that's one of the bills. The other one is the decriminalization bill that reduces the penalties in Illinois from $500 or 6 months in jail to basically a super parking ticket. It's between $55 and $125 for any possession less than 14 grams or 15 grams, which for those of you who don't do grams and ounces, 15 grams is about a half an ounce.
Just in case you're wondering.
Yeah, just in case you're wondering. So anyway, that's a fair amount of medical grade marijuana. And again, we're not advocating that you violate any law, but I think what you need to look at is that Governor Rauner or Rayner or however you say his last name, has got a couple of bills that are in front of him that he, if he's smart, once it hits his desk, will sign them. And again, I think, it's the politics thing. And,
That's right.
And I think you need to get out there and you need to make sure that the governor hears your voice loud and clear. We want the pilot program to go on for 4 years minimum after the first dispensary opens. And yes, we want these decriminalization provisions put in, because again, I can't, with Louisiana, there's a fairly large population base. With Chicago being in Illinois, there's a huge population base. I can't even estimate how many millions of dollars the state of Illinois will save if they quit incarcerating people for minor offenses.
Yes, if Louisiana can save 17 million, I imagine Illinois would save quite a few more.
Yeah, it'd be, 10 times that amount. And again, those are taxpayer dollars that are spent incarcerating people for relatively minor offenses.
Yeah, it's interesting. You mentioned Wyoming and the tit for tat and the marijuana monopoly, the politics of this. The state legislature considered 6 bills relating to cannabis in the session that just ended. Of those bills, 2 bills passed. One, a bill to legalize the hemp extract known as CBD to treat seizures, and a bill that eases penalties for first-time drug users. So even Wyoming, one of the toughest states in the nation for cannabis, one of the most conservative, is seeing a slow process towards recognizing this as medicine, and then it's just a stepping stone to recognize this as safer than alcohol. So I do applaud Wyoming, even though they're slow. It's better slow than nothing.
Yes, and again, just getting the dialogue open and not having the door slammed in your face is a giant step in the right direction. Because I can assure you that when Casey and I first got involved in this battle in Colorado 6 years ago now, 7 for some of us, the doors were not easily opened. And
you had to build the doors. The doors weren't even made. You had to build the house of cannabis and decide where to put the door back then, Mr. Houghton.
Yeah, and people were just saying no before you even had a chance to get a word in edgeways. And now what we're seeing is we're seeing people that are probably staunchly opposed to it that are at least listening.
Yeah, it's interesting up there. Normal's actually pushing already for the next legislative session, Mr. Houghton. And you should too, if you're listening to this. If your laws, your Senate bills do not pass, I know it's difficult. I know it's hours and months of work, and then they die on the committee floors. But it shows what happens in Wyoming and what happened in Louisiana. We suffer defeat. We go back. We rewrite the bill. We gather more signatures. And guess what? We can change the world. And that's what's happening. After more than a year of rewriting the laws there, Mr. Houghton, they have new initiatives that are going forward to appear before the February deadline of 2016. So they're gathering 25,000 signatures in Wyoming right now. So get out, sign up, and you can change the law in 2016 in Wyoming.
Yeah, and see that, the thing is that to me, I understand that Wyoming isn't the most populous state in the world, but at least people are getting out and being heard.
That's right.
And so we're going to talk a little bit more about that on the other side. You're listening to the Cannabusiness Attorney and my partner in crime, Casey. We'll be back on the other side. 15. And I'm down to seeds and stems again.
Okay.
Thank you.
I don't think I've ever heard the seeds and stems again. I don't think I've ever heard of the seeds and stems again.
No, I didn't know that. Legalize marijuana for medical uses. So we'll just wrap that up real quick on that Wyoming one.
Yeah.
And then we can go. I have a lot of news on the New York one too.
Do New York, and I'll just banter back and forth.
Because there's a lot of people upset about that.
Really? I can't imagine.
Yeah, right. And then one thing about the Virginia hemp bill, House Bill 1277 SB 955 passed. So starting July 1st in Virginia, they're going to start growing marijuana. Hemp for research. Up to 8 licenses that move. Hello, gentlemen. Hey, good morning, sir.
What's up, boss?
Hey, how are you?
How's your Memorial Day?
Good. I didn't do a damn thing.
You worked your ass off for me. I mean, writing this book.
Yeah. And I kept drafting myself into a corner. So
On draft about that.
thank you.
When you're done, just a quick question. Do you know how to start a nonprofit? Is it hard?
It's a federal application.
Yeah, so just make the you start out as a state nonprofit, and then you apply for federal nonprofit status. It's either going to be a 501c3, C2, C3, C4, C5, C6.
So that regulates a lot of things you can do, how you can talk, how you can, what you can say, how you can raise money, and how your money's tracked. So it's not just registry, but your hands will be tied up a little bit differently after that too. Yeah. But that's okay. A lot of people do it because the way they can donate money now, raise money now.
Well, and raising money and have it be tax deductible is the biggest thing.
When you're done, can you give me a few minutes? Sure. So I can go over some of my ideas with you.
Isn't it great having an attorney?
Oh, yeah, I love it. Thanks, Charles.
Do that.
I'm looking forward to the show in Town. I'm looking
Back to 30.
so forward to Kansas City. It's gonna be a crazy trip. I'm half excited and half anxious. I do expect to be pulled over quite a bit. That's why I kind of weird.
You will.
I'll have your car there. Please talk to my attorney. Do you have any questions? We'll table
Call
it.
me. I'll
If we
say-
get pulled over-
AllDayVaporLabs.com has painstakingly pursued a product that does not fade throughout the day, does not overwhelm your palate, and leaves no chemical aftertaste behind. Try AllDayVaporLabs.com and use promo code Radio1580 for an additional 15% off.
For your morning sativa or your evening indica. K-High, the weed talk station.
Mike's live.
Mr. Howe, there's your song, their lowrider coming right back at you. This is KC Stark with HowToMarijuana.com, and we are live with the Cannabusiness Attorney, Mr. Charles D. Howe. And I just want to wrap up this Wyoming talk before we go on to another story. The proposed initiative, Mr. Howe, is called the Peggy A. Kelly Wyoming Cannabis Act of 2016. They need 25,000 signatures, and it would legalize marijuana for medical reasons and allow the state residents to grow hemp. More than 70% of Wyoming residents support medical marijuana, according to the University of Wyoming poll. So watch out, Wyoming.
Yeah.
Here comes cannabis. Get out your pens and papers, sign that, and prepare for business.
Yeah, and 25,000 signatures. I mean, it sounds like a lot, but when we were talking about the stuff that was going on in Ohio,
Yes.
and what they had, the competing bills that are appearing there, they need 305,000 signatures in Ohio,
Yes.
and so pretty much most pollsters will tell you they got to have double the amount that you're supposed to have, because a lot of them get kicked out as duplicates or
Not registered.
not registered or just bogus names or whatever. Anyway, my hat goes off to the people in Wyoming. I hope that we can get some relief to some of the people up there that really need it.
Yes, for medical
Especially-
marijuana and cannabis, Mr. Howard.
Yeah,
I mean, you know
especially-
that area. There's a lot of good growing. I mean, the season in Wyoming is not very long, but they got land and land and land.
Yeah, there's no shortage of places to grow, number one. And number two, there's a lot of people that serve our country. We've got a lot of veterans that are from Wyoming, and we've got a lot of kids and adults as well that could use the product as medicine. And
Oh, life-saving medicine, Mr. Howard. We've seen it over and over on this show. And if you're just tuning in today, we've had patients on here talk to us that have suffered traumatic brain injuries, and
Yeah.
were on the verge of either, opiate-based zombie prescriptions for the rest of their lives,
that weren't working to stop the seizures anyway.
or a brain surgery that might actually remove part of your brain.
Yeah, and some would say that I've already had that surgery.
And you're doing quite well, Mr.
Yeah,
Howard.
I know. I'm a highly functioning
Non-stoner.
prefrontal lobotomy guy.
But that actually, we've had them on here, and they are now, to our knowledge, Sharice Nipper is her name, Nipper. We're having a charity fundraiser for her this Saturday at the Cannabis Club, Studio A64.com, from 4 to 8 p.m. But that woman is now on cannabis. She's functional. She's, I believe, off her prescription pills, except Xanax, because there's a lot of withdrawal symptoms that are associated with that painful medicine. But we had them. It works. It's not a joke. It's not a myth. It's not theoretical. It's factual. So congratulations, Wyoming. Here's a bit of a sad story, Mr. Howden. You know, we talked about Illinois, the program that was approved. The same situation's happening up there in New York. You know, it was just a year ago, the governor was there next to that beautiful 10-year-old girl signing the bill into law last July. Her name was Amanda Hauser. Was so excited for the event that she almost forgot about her epilepsy. And now, a year later, guess what? They still can't have access to medical marijuana in New York, Mr. Howden.
Yeah, and again, it is bureaucratic fumbling that is causing the problem. And if you take a look at what's happened in Alaska versus what's happened everywhere else.
We had been on Alaska. Alaska knows how to do it.
It is night and day, because they didn't ignore the problem. They didn't say, okay, we hope it goes away. They said, we've got a program. The people have spoken. We're going to implement it. And they are moving at what I consider light speed.
They are moving at a very rapid American pace. We, the people, have taken over the process in Alaska, where it's just like alcohol. Get the ABC board together, sit down, talk about where you're going to sell it, how you're going to package it, where the parking is going to be, and let's get those licenses issued. Not not in New York. It's the exact opposite. It's now over a year after that, and they still can't have access. The plan was to start an 18-month clock for the state health department to have a program underway for non-smokable forms, pills, oils, and vapors in New York. So that was an 18-month clock, and we're 12 months gone.
Yeah, and they're just now accepting applications on forms that came out 2 weeks ago.
Interesting you mentioned that, Mr. Howard. We talked about this 2 weeks ago. And guess what? The state has actually pushed back the deadline by a week to June 5th to apply for a license to grow and distribute medical marijuana in New York. So there is still time, and it does take an application. If you need help with that, you can call Mr. Howden. The applicants are required to pay a $10,000 non-refundable application fee, not that bad, and a $200,000 registration fee, which would be refunded to the applicants if they were not selected. So this is a moment of opportunity in New York. If you want to submit your application, there is still time because of the foot dragging.
Yeah, and that's what we've seen, kind of, it's more common than not, and it's very disturbing that, once a piece of legislation is passed and the people have spoken and the representatives have spoken, there are still, sand in the cogs that are preventing things from moving forward. And that's very, very troubling, because every day that someone is dragging their feet or exerting their power or trying to build some sort of a bureaucracy around them with this new program, somebody's suffering.
That's right, Mr. Howden. Matter of fact, there is a report here in the story. Sue Nil Kadera, 58, of Pittsburgh, was diagnosed with colon cancer in 2005. This woman's dying. Mm-hmm. I think we have a moral obligation and a legal obligation based on the laws to help her. It is the grand basis of the Hippocratic Oath: do no harm and help when you can, even if it just relieves the suffering.
And the thing is too is that it is not the rule maker's role to put roadblocks in the way. They should be looking for solutions. They should be
building those highways to success, right?
Yeah, it's easy to stand back and say no, or that won't work, or whatever. But that you're not sitting in that job because it's easy. You're sitting in the job because presumably you know how to do this. And if you don't know how to do this, I can tell you, 50 people easily that would come in and help you from Washington, from Oregon, from Colorado, Arizona, Nevada, Illinois, everywhere, that would be willing to come in and say, listen, we know a way to regulate it. Pick one and get it going.
You're right, Mr. Allen. We have a lot of listeners out there in New York because that is the financial capital. And there's over 200 publicly traded cannabis stocks currently on the OTC. So they see this as big business potential. And as New York award, those licenses are supposed to be issued by January 1st. That's around the corner. So you have until June 5th of this year to submit your applications to the state with a $10,000 non-refundable application fee. And guess what? You can start taking advantage of what is expected in the next 5 years, Mr. Howard, according to industry estimates, to be a $1 billion market in New York alone.
$1 billion in New York alone.
That's right. This, billion's nothing in New York. That's just chump change. So when we're playing with cannabis money, this is a multi-billion-dollar business that is just giving birth to itself all across the nation by people just like you. When I say giving birth, what does that mean? Well, guess what? New York expects Mr. Howland to award 5 contracts, and each one would be permitted to open up 4 dispensaries and distribute the drug to patients in New York certified by their doctors.
Yeah.
That is so much fun. I've been there. I've done that. I love it. So yes, I take a bite of the 1 billion and get in line, submit your application. If you're not ready this time, stay attention because Wyoming's coming, Alaska's coming, California's coming.
Well,
there's bills all across this nation.
And as the industry in New York starts to mature, you're going to see the ancillary businesses that we always preach about here. We are talking about business, and there's going to be a lot of need in New York for expertise, for skilled services, for skilled labor, for people just to work in the industry, the worker bees, whoever. And
the doctors, the nurses, the practitioners, all of those businesses begin with the legislation. Those laws, by default, create problems and solutions. And if you listen to us at letstalkpod.com or visit us at howtomarijuana.com or thecannabusinessattorney.com, guess what? Reach out. We help. We do it all the time. We've trained thousands of people, to include us educating senators and governors. So I'm sure we can help you too. There is a move right now, Mr. Allen, by some state lawmakers, apparently, Democrats and Republicans, the Purple Party, and they're pressing for a bill to allow emergency access to the drug for patients with the most needs. The question is, who decides who that is?
Yeah, who gets to be God?
Yeah, who plays God then, and who has the most need? Their legislative session ends also on June 17th. So if you're listening in New York and you're tired of prohibition and you want to have access to this, call your representative. Email them. Bash them on Facebook if you have to. Andrew Cuomo, Governor Andrew Cuomo, had no problem standing next to that 10-year-old girl, posing for that publicity stunt, being on the front page of the paper with a big smile on his face, saving lives. And here we are a year later, and that woman is still waiting. That child is still waiting.
Yeah, and that, to me, that's a travesty. I mean, the people have spoken, and I know for a fact the people in New York can work faster than this. I mean, I've seen them. With tragedy after tragedy after tragedy. When they're motivated, they do amazing things.
Oh, New York's a big apple. They don't mess around. Actually, I'll give a shout out here and let the Assemblyman Gottfried speak for himself. Cuomo's spokesman. Our top priority is to deliver relief to those in pain, and we are doing so as expeditiously as possible under current federal guidelines and within the confines of our Compassionate Care Act, unquote. That sounds like a tap dance to me.
It did. You could see
top priority.
Really?
Expeditiously?
I would hate to see something that was a low priority and wasn't being done expeditiously.
Within the confines?
Yeah. I mean, it's all those mealy mouth words mean one thing. We figured out a way to delay it.
And that's exactly what's happened. Governor Cuomo was not a fan of cannabis. It was only when that child came out and the rest of the people started supporting it that he went out, posed with that child, took the picture, got all the press, and now we're using terms like top priority, expeditiously, and within the guidelines and confines. I don't like that kind of talk, New York. What we need to do is exactly what the people ask for. Let them have their cannabis. It's not that hard. Get your sticky fingers out of it. People are dying out there, Mr. Howden.
Yeah, and the thing is that the quality of life for that little girl hasn't gotten any better, and it could. And if you can alleviate the suffering of one person, I think that's a pretty good day. And they could do tens of thousands of people, with the stroke of a pen.
That's right.
And so instead of political bickering and trying to build little kingdoms within this new industry, let's get the industry going. Like Casey said, it's not really that hard.
No.
There's not the boogeyman that you think about. Put a regulatory process in place. When Casey and I first started in this industry, there were no regulatory models.
No.
And so we made them up. That's how it happened.
Yes.
And there are flaws in the Colorado system. There are flaws in each of the systems. But the situation now is that you can pick and choose what parts of each regulatory model you choose to implement, avoid the pitfalls, and get the medicine out there relatively quickly. I mean, if you want to know how to get it done quickly, just take a look at our neighbors to the north in Alaska and say, watch what they do, because they're not messing around. That
ABC board got together, the people sat down, the governor, the senators, the representatives, the people all sat around task forces. The board just formed last week there, and they're meeting with fellow Americans. It is gorgeous what's happening in Alaska. And let's just kind of run down what's going on in New York, just so you have the tip-top facts there if you're curious about how this is going to work. These are some of the details of what's supposed to happen in New York by January 1st, 2016. Marijuana medical would be available to those people with cancer, HIV, Lou Gehrig's, Parkinson's, MS, damage to the nervous system or spinal cord, epilepsy, inflammatory bowel disease, neuropathies, Huntington's disease, and other conditions, quote unquote, added by the State Department. Only doctors certified by the State of Health would be able to prescribe, they use the word prescribe marijuana for the first time, that would be grown in New York at 5 locations, dispensed at 20. Only non-smokable forms of marijuana would be allowed in New York. The drug would be taxed at 7%, Mr. Howden, with proceeds split between the state and that county in which it was sold. So only if you have the county do you make money from it. The applications, we mentioned that earlier, $10,000 non-refundable, $200,000 registration fee that is refundable if you're not selected. The sunshine clause in this one is actually 7 years. So I think in 7 years it'll become so standard that that sunshine clause will not come into effect.
Yeah, and again, I'm not real happy with any place that has got some sort of a sunset provision.
Yeah,
and
right.
the reason being is because 7 years from now, it becomes a political football. And
it gets kicked around again, exactly.
Yeah, and it doesn't need to be kicked around again.
It's like ripping the Band-Aid off
again
before it's ready, right? Just ripping it back off.
Yeah, and so I don't see a need for it. If it's not working, change the regulatory model, but don't make it the subject of a wholesale
clause.
It's going to die.
That's right. So if you're listening to us across the area, from New York to the Big Apple to the Great Frontier, Alaska, stay live here with letstalkpod.com, the Cannabusiness Attorney. See you on the other side.
And we're clear?
Hey, thank you.
Thank you.
No problem.
Selfies. Selfie.
That's a good show. I got actually read all the articles, so I felt, I got tired of working in the road helps. I got people writing them all this week, so I'll try to get one call once a day.
Yeah.
And that'll be, it just makes it so much fun.
Okay, after the break, why don't we talk about employment law?
Okay.
And because there was a lady that was hired somewhere.
I heard about that.
Yeah, and then fired as soon as she showed up. So she cleared her marijuana use ahead of time. Really?
Yeah, you're right. And besides, my navigation map is only as big as my screen. I'll buy one.
You don't have to buy one. There are great new maps out from MMI, and you can get one free.
Do I have to give my email address or send them a presentation or something?
Nope, just stop by any of the businesses that sponsor them, like Awesome Ride Service Incorporated. Call 719-694-5200. Mark's Collision Classics, located at 3606 North Stone Avenue, Suite C. Paul's Gourmet Popcorn, located at 7852 North Academy Boulevard. Or Colorado's Car Connection, located at 1794 South Academy Boulevard.
I drive past those guys all the time.
Well, stop in. Now, when the road up here splits, go to the left.
You just think you know everything, don't you?
Just saying.
Long-held traditions meet newfound freedoms at Agitation. Come to the level-lit spot that has the biggest selection of concentrates in southern Colorado. All walks of life take part in marijuana. That's why Agitation House has a welcoming atmosphere and knowledgeable bartenders that speak one experience and customer feedback. Quality selection and customer service is what sets them apart from the rest. And proud of located at 428 South McCulloch Boulevard. You can give them a call at 719-547-0009 or check them out on PuebloDispensary.com. Start your day right. The best place on the inside that takes pride in customer service. They're in and out in just a second.
Hey guys, this is Nicole from Verizon.
Hey Nicole, tell everybody what you
We have experienced bartenders, the lowest prices, and the best service.
That makes me realize the place you want to go overseas. How many strains do you have?
We actually have over 30 strains. We have 25 types of THF concentrates, shatter, live resin, and yep, and all of our new Verizon products are focused for our patients. Weed starting at 15, also concentrates 2 for 45. And to the mom and pop shop. We're locally owned and operated.
Located at 1460 Boise Heights, or call them at 719-597-7002. New Verizon, where the patient always comes first.
Wild Ride Radio, the only talk show for everything motorcycle. If you're a weekend rider or a hardcore biker, this is the show for you. Join me, Dallas Hageman, every weekend as we talk two wheels.
Thanks, Liv.
Good morning.
A little jazzy there, Chicago. I
No,
like that.
that's the lead-in song for, God, I can't remember, it was a night court. That's what it was.
Night court. Here we go. So, and if you want to stay out of court, the best way to do that is to know the rules, regulations, the policies, procedures, so you can make business and not be behind bars. And that's what we do here every day. We've done it across the country. So thank you for listening. Mr. Howden, what else you got on your desk there?
Well, one of the things I wanted to talk about this morning was the employment law and cannabis. I saw an article where some young lady was cleared her medical use of marijuana with her employer, and then on the first day that she showed up, she was fired because she tested positive for THC. Big surprise.
Yes. Did she notify the employer prior, correct?
Yeah, that was my understanding. I don't remember what state it was in. I was reading a whole bunch of stuff over the weekend. So,
but employment law is critical. You know, all across this country, myself included, I've used cannabis since I was a child. I stopped using it when I joined the service because it violated my oath. But for the majority of my life, I've lived with the fear of incarceration, prison. When we opened our businesses, Mr. Howden, I break federal law in a daily basis. Mm-hmm. But I abide by my constitutional rights within Colorado and the other states. So if you're employed out there, that's terrifying. You have to live, quote unquote, in the cannabis closet.
Well, and the thing is that, for instance, in Colorado, in both constitutional amendments, Amendment 20 and Amendment 64, there are provisions that specifically state that an accommodation does not have to be made for someone who is using marijuana, even for medical purposes, and even though it's legal here in Colorado recreationally. So in Colorado and most other states, if you partake of the product, either as a patient or recreationally, even though it's legal, if you have an employer who has a zero drug tolerance policy, that policy takes precedence and they can fire you. And there's nothing that any attorney or anybody else can do to save your job, even if that's the sole reason for firing you, is that you tested positive for THC. So you need to pay attention to your individual state's laws and also learn to abide by them, because you know the argument that it's legal, that it's in the Constitution twice in Colorado, or that it is legal in Colorado or Washington or Oregon or wherever you happen to be, and that's going to be your argument for keeping your job if you test positive for THC. I'm here to tell you that in those states where they have reserved that right to the employer, that's a losing argument and you will lose your job. And so you need to pay attention to that. And especially also too, if you are a government employee, like a federal government employee, there's an additional risk there because the product does remain illegal at the federal level. It's still a Schedule I controlled substance. I hope that I can quit saying that sometime in the very near future. But for now, you have to play with the rules that you're dealt with, get out there and change them. But right now, I've had a lot of people contact me and say, well, my employer's threatening to fire me if they find out that I'm using marijuana or something like that.
That is true.
And there's nothing that I can do to help them.
That is correct. And that's my policy, is never ask for a job, create a job. At the Marijuana Business Academy, for over 5 years now, we've literally trained thousands of people. So if you're tired, you want to say, take this job and shove it. We've been there, we've done that, we do it daily. That's what we do when we're not on the radio, is we're building businesses from hemp to CBDs, from cannabis tours to cannabis cultivation, from hemp hats to hemp fabric and manufacturing plants. As a matter of fact, there'll be a rather interesting party for hemp this evening. That is a secret party I'll have to report on tomorrow, Mr. Howden.
Yeah, I may be going to that party. I don't know yet, but at any rate, it's only secret because there's a limited amount of space. There's nothing clandestine going on. Actually, it's a party to celebrate putting in hemp in the ground in Colorado for this growing season.
And that is a beautiful moment. So when we talk about employment law and you're listening to us, in America, regardless of where you're at, they have the right to hire and fire you almost at will. Cannabis just makes it a crime in most places. We talked about Louisiana this morning. We talked about the other penalties being reduced. So slowly but surely, those Senate bills and House bills are changing, and you can change them. And if you want to, join us June 5th in Kansas City at the Uptown Theater from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m., and we will discuss those laws. Mr. Houghton will go over the hemp and farm bills, the medical and recreational marijuana bills, so that you can create your own job and start, don't work for someone, make a business for yourself.
Well, and that's really what we ought to start putting that as our tagline or preaching. What we're trying to do is to rekindle the entrepreneurial spirit in the United States.
And hemp is bringing it back in a big way.
Well, and it does two things. One is it gets people up off their couches, and they're fighting for a cause that matters. Because like I've said before, if I can have a job where I can make a positive impact on people's lives, possibly save their life, and improve the quality of their life while making money doing it, I can't think of a better way to spend my time on this planet.
And we enjoy it, Mr. Howden. And there are a lot of challenges. We've gone over 5 different states already this morning, and laws that just changed over the weekend. And that happens every day. And that's why if you do want to stay involved, please listen to us Monday through Friday. We do chew up those laws and spit them back out so you can understand them. From Louisiana, Wyoming, Illinois, New York, Colorado, Alaska. It is happening all across this country.
And remember, the reason why we're doing this is not to bore you with what's going on in a state that's not near you. It's to do 2 things. One is to show you the possibilities of what's out there. And maybe you want to move to New York. Maybe you want to move to Illinois. Maybe you want to move to Arizona after this spring here in Colorado, I would love to move back to Arizona.
Thinking about it myself.
Yeah, but at any rate, what we're trying to do is to open your eyes up to possibilities. What are your possibilities for being an entrepreneur, for getting out there, creating the job like Casey said?
Yeah, don't ask for a job, create a business.
Yeah, and that, you know, everybody says, well, how do I do that? It's very simple. Find some need. All you have to do is watch the industry and watch where it's floundering. For example, if you can solve the banking problem, please give me a call and we will start picking out private aircraft.
I think we should make that aircraft out of hemp, Mr. Houghton. Matter of fact, if you're listening to Mr. Houghton, he said, create the job, listen and be prepared. Right now, just over the weekend, Virginia lawmakers passed House Bill 1277, SB 955. Get this, starting July 1st, farmers in the Commonwealth could finally grow hemp for research. But that is a very good step. The Virginia Industrial Hemp Coalition says the law would allow 9 types of research universities can conduct, including economic impact of hemp as a cash crop. So if you're a farmer in Virginia, or you want to be a farmer in Virginia, guess what? They just made it possible, and it's going to start lickety-split quick on July 1st. House Bill 1277, SB 955. Get ready to rock and roll. Don't ask for a job. Create a business.
And that's exactly right. And you know, and we've also spoken about hemp and cannabis being held to what I consider to be a hypercritical standard for anyone to say, oh yeah, it's okay. I think that so long as we're having things like what's going on in Virginia with the House bill and the Senate bill that allow it to move forward, even for research purposes, at least that's going to provide the information so that we can finally, you know, tell people to shut up. It's okay.
Yes, and I believe what happens is as soon as businesses are formed, it changes the conversation to what if to what now and how. And what we've seen in Colorado is it has not increased crime. It has not become a big gateway drug. There are big and bad players out there no matter where you go, but what this does, it actually taxes it, regulates it, structures it, and just by, you know, decreasing the process of criminalization there in Louisiana, they're saving 17 million. I imagine Colorado's already saved that times 2.
Plus, you know, how many jobs have we created in this state? Tens of thousands of jobs. You know, and it's entrepreneurs, people that were willing to risk virtually everything that they have in order to get in the industry. They weren't getting the money from the banks because the banks weren't lending it to them.
And it's still a federal crime, so you're breaking the law, and that takes some serious entrepreneurial spirit. But that's what our founding fathers and mothers did. They wrote a constitution. They said, no taxation without representation. We're taking this and building a nation on life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and you can too.
Yeah, and that's you know, it is odd to me still that phrase appears, you know, in the preamble, the pursuit of happiness. It's like, you know, even in the 1700s, people realized that part of the dream is being happy. And part of being happy is being in control of your own destiny. And so when you see what's going on, you should start looking at where's my opportunity? Where can I get into this? And that's why we do events like we're doing on June 5th in Kansas City at the Uptown Theater.
Going to be a blast.
That's why we're on letstalkpop.com. That's why Casey's going on the End of Prohibition tour. It's all because we want people to have the opportunity, if they want to take advantage of it, to move forward in this industry and profit and leave a legacy that they can be proud to give to their children.
And that's what it's in for me, Mr. Houghton. If you're listening to us across the nation, we have about 60 seconds before we cut this off, but this has been another great day for cannabis. Laws are changing, opportunities presenting itself, and get ready to rock and roll because this is the age of cannabis.
Yeah, we are coming across the country, and so we will see you tomorrow. Everybody have a fantastic day. Keep apprised of what's going on around you and look for those opportunities because they're everywhere. See you tomorrow.
Amigo.
and lawyers, cons, and money. Woo! Yeah.
Thank you, Sean.
And we're clear. Thanks, guys.
Thank you,
Thank
Chicago.
you.
Great show.
Oh, yeah, always.
The mics are off. This thing.
Great show, Mr. That felt good, the cruise today.
Stop.
Well, it's good having a day off too, not coming. I'm glad you mentioned that.